Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans, college sports fans, live golf fans, both of you, across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show, and it's pretty apropos. I've got my good buddy Bill Bender from the Sporting News coming on in moments via the miracle of the internet, optic fibers, fiber optic connections, etc. But before I get to this, I want to wish everybody, as we record this, I want to wish everybody a happy May Day. May Day. May Day. Yes, the Tim May Show on May Day. It doesn't get any better than that. And without further ado, let's bring on Bill Bender of the Sporting News fame. Also, one of the great youth lacrosse coaches, I think, across the nation and around the world. Bill, welcome back to the Tim May Show, my friend.
I wouldn't go that far, but on the coaching end, I'd like to have fun. But hey, man, it's great to be on with you, Tim. I know it's been a busy couple of weeks between the NFL draft and the NCAA football and spring games and everything else. But we are happy. Yeah, Tim, this has to be your favorite month, right? It's May. It's Tim May. It's that's a terrible joke to start, but it's great to be on with you. Let's get this thing going.
One of my favorite things is when I cover the Indy 500, they started putting up a sign the last several years. One of their slogans is "This is May," and I would stand in front of it and get my picture taken. But because the Indy 500 was always the month of May, and now it's basically the last 2 weekends. Well, 2 weekends in May in terms of the Indianapolis 500. And what goes on over there used to be you'd show up on May 1 and start running your car and start figuring out whether you could get speed, way back in the good old days. But it is what it is. Speaking of getting speed, I want to hit you with like 4 different topics today. By the way, Bill Bender, sitting in, is that the best term? Best way of putting it, Bill? Sitting in for the I don't know what the iconic Clay Hall, who takes Fridays off for some reason, but still tries to contribute things. He'll be back on Monday. We've got a pretty good show already planned for Monday, but I do appreciate you sitting in for Clay. Is that a big shoe? Are those big shoes to fill or a big chair to fill? How would you describe?
I would describe myself as a super sub on this show, right? Like the 6th man award, and you come in for Clay when we can. And, you and I have been doing this for a couple of years now. I've been on the show as a guest and enjoy it. I always enjoy it. I think with Clay, obviously we've talked about this. He Columbus icon, like everybody else, I get to talk to this time of year. My favorite shows are whether it's you or Bobby or, the 97.1 crowd. You mentioned lacrosse. That's when I get, the most attention. Hey, I heard you on Tim May. Hey, I heard you on 97.1. And I play it up, as you can imagine. You try to be humble, but I definitely play it up because, there's no better place to be on in terms of talking about sports and being able to take that. I can't get away from it, though, is what I'm telling you. I'll be talking about it on the sideline, and I enjoy doing it.
Of course, man. Hey, I want to let me flip the script here on you since you brought that up. What are people right now when it comes to anything from a national perspective, like when you've been on the sidelines, they're helping coach, et cetera, and dealing with parents? What is on their mind the most in terms of the latest developments in regards to college athletics more than anything else? I mean, are they talking about the 5 years to play 5 years to play 5 seasons of football or major college sports? Are they talking about the expansion of the NCAA Tournament to 76 teams starting this coming season? I think that's correct, right? Are they talking about the Brendan Sorsby betting scandal? I think that's the best way of putting it, because it is, but is that a tip of an iceberg that just keeps floating out there? You know what I mean? Is it going to hit the NCAA ship in a hard way or one other? But are they talking about maybe a revamping once again of how the 12-team and possibly soon to be at least 16-team college football playoff, how it's going to be handled in terms of making it fair for everybody, when in fact that's impossible? But the idea that the top 2 seeds could choose whether they want to host a game or choose the bowl game they want to go to, which I thought they already were getting to do that in the first place. But what's on the people's minds, I guess?
Last week it was NFL draft, and now that we're post NFL draft, I think, Brendan Sorsby really took the cycle this week. And I know it's an interesting topic for me because Tim, I'll start off with, I don't think he'll play NCAA football again. I mean, I could be wrong
either.
there. I just want you, and the killer detail of sorts is he allegedly bet on a game while he was at Indiana as a backup quarterback. He allegedly bet for Indiana, but I keep telling people all week there was a Reds manager once upon a time that bet for the Reds, and he's still not in Cooperstown, and he passed away, and it's been a source of debate for years. I mean, I personally think he should be in the Hall of Fame, but the way I also understand the punishment when the rules are on the wall. So, this is a different animal now, though, because 18 to 22-year-old college students have more access to gambling than ever before. So,
yep.
Is it you mentioned the phrase tip of the iceberg, Tim? Probably. I mean, I would say not so much tip of the iceberg, but this won't be the first time this happens.
No. I mean, it was not the first time it happens, and they found out the Fordham players who basically they have been charged, or whatever you want to call it, alleged that they through games may not be the correct term, but manipulated the point spread one way or the other and things like that. I mean, they're going to be, these little things are going to keep popping up because it's kind of crazy. But, the Sorsby thing is interesting. It sounds like he's admitted it, or at least they've got the goods on him. With Pete Rose never did a mea culpa until it was too late, and meaning admitting you did it. And, you can make this argument, well, he always bet on his team to win. Well, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. You still have inside information on a team you're betting on, is one of the problems with a Brendan Sorsby, for example. And whether you played in that game or not is not relevant. I mean,
well, he didn't.
The thing about it is
he didn't go. He didn't go to rehab if you don't have a problem.
Correct.
And I think that's another sticking point. So go ahead. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, that's a great point. But now he is in rehab. Wait a minute. Has he gone to rehab? I'm trying to think now.
Well, he's going to enter, the
latest on him?
He's going to enter a rehab facility, and gambling's a serious issue, right? Like, there's people with serious problems, and this is a tough conversation for me in some ways because I'd be hypocritical to say I don't have a betting app on my phone, or that I'm not going to put a couple dollars on a horse this weekend. But I have no insider knowledge of horse racing, right? Like, I have no idea who's going to win that race.
Right.
Half the time you just pick a name of a horse and then you're like, oh man, I lost $20. But I also,
well, let me interrupt you, but there's a difference.
Right.
There's a difference between doing your homework. I mean, I always bet every year on the Derby. It's the only thing I ever bet on. And I've always bet on the Derby through twinspires.com. And I do my research on the horses of what is available out there and then hunches, but what's available, is his father was a mudder. His mother was a mudder. You know what I mean? That kind of research, want to know about the weather and things like that. So I don't just willy-nilly, throw a dart against the wall like maybe some people do. I mean, but the point is there's a difference between doing that kind of research, which is available to everybody, and having inside knowledge about, your right tackle's got a bummed up leg, or your weak side linebacker on your team, has had a shoulder problem for 3 weeks. I mean, that's the difference, that between being an inside guy and an outside guy. And I understand that. And it's basically by keeping the games on the QT, but keep them on the QT for whom? The betting public.
Well, I spoke with Dr. James Borchers last week or the week before, Big Ten's chief medical officer, and we had a long range discussion about the impact of the emotional well-being of student athletes and a lot of the focus of this conversation, Dr. James, by the way, former Ohio State player, really good one. And
The only guy I think who touched Desmond Howard on that.
That's what I didn't
tournament.
ask him that in the conversation, even though I kind of knew he was on the field for that moment. But
I always bring that up to him when I see him.
He's probably like, I at least got a hand on the jersey. So the prop bets are the big ones. Now, if let's use Jeremiah Smith, for example. If Jeremiah Smith in the opener doesn't get 8 catches for 117 and a half yards or whatever the prop ends up being, he will receive messages online. That's an example, so we're equating performance with prop bets. I personally think college prop bets probably should be banned anyway. And the other end of this is college athletes are around college students with gambling problems.
Correct.
And that's where you talk about when you get in a dicey situation, when you're trying to manipulate spreads based on things that happen on campus, so-and-so, they know this. So I think Sorsby's in some trouble. Some of the betting he sounds like he was doing was like anything I would do. But again, the difference is I'm not the starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bearcats or the Texas Tech Red Raiders. I'm sitting in my living room. And college has to nip this now. I don't make an example of them maybe, but the NFL, this kind of stuff comes to the NFL. There's enough conspiracy theories about the NFL. They can't have something like this happen. And I would say it's the same about college football.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, the other problem is of nailing it down. I mean, I haven't read all of the details of the Sorsby situation. Saw with Pete Nakos of On3.com. I think he said what was the number? Was it 10,000 bets?
Quite a few. Yeah,
it was a big number. And but then the problem you also run into in these kind of situations with athletes is there surrogate betting going on, meaning one of your friends or an acquaintance or several of them are putting down wagers based on your information or your feel on it, and you are benefiting from it, even though you're keeping your name out of it because you're not formally making the bets on your computer or your app or whatever. So, there are all kinds of like tentacles in a situation like this. The Sorsby thing just brings it to a head of showing, number one, that there are guys who play sports, Art Schlichter, going back to him, whatever, who are willing to, kind of throw caution to the wind, if that's a correct term, and do some things they clearly are told they're not supposed to be doing in terms of the gambling element. But then the problem is, back with Schlichter, the big problem was there was no online gambling. There was no FanDuel, et cetera, DraftKings, whatever it is, whatever your avenue is, everything you were doing was pretty much not legal. You know what I mean? Not just against league rules was not legal. And the problem is when you run into a problem in terms of paying off what you owe, there are two things that can happen there. One of which is you can somehow or another scramble up and get the money together, or you become beholden to the people who are holding your chit. The chit meaning you owe this guy $10,000 or, $500,000, and then they have you. They have you by the short hair, so to speak. So there are all kinds of ways this can go once you're doing it surreptitiously.
Yeah, well, two differences. One, that's every scene in Goodfellas or Sopranos or, those kind of movies. That was the old way. Now, I think it's easier to get caught now, though, Tim. I think,
it's very much easier.
I think it's so much easier to get caught and pull up, like, you mentioned Pete's story. You pull up your bet history. Back then, it's word of mouth type stuff, So,
yeah.
And I think we're venturing into a territory too, where the NCAA, when they send that message, that one of the kickbacks is going to be, and this is a true thing, you can't watch a college football event without a commercial about FanDuel or BetMGM or, Kevin Hart and LeBron on the commercial. And
ESPN.
It's ever present everywhere. I know, and we tend to, I think a lot of the viewing experience for a lot of fans has shifted from just, I want my team to win, to I want my 3-team parlay to hit. That's a consequence of what we've dealt with. I personally, on a personal level, I think that kind of stuff is probably less fun, because I always enjoyed going to Vegas and doing it, right? When you were in college and you'd go and, wow, this is amazing. I get to bet on a baseball game. I can't do this in Ohio, and that kind of thing. Now you can sit at a Reds game and throw down 10 prop bets. And I think that these are things that college athletes are exposed to, but at the same time, the rules are the rules. And, if I'm Sorsby, he's probably, his best avenue might be going to the supplemental draft. But again, the NFL, what kind of message is that? The NFL they're pretty harsh on that stuff too, obviously. Jamison Williams served a 6-game suspension a couple years ago for placing a bet while in the facility. So it's not going to get any easier on that end, because the NFL is going to do anything and everything to protect that shield.
Yeah. Now Jamison Williams is brought suit against
now the Big Ten. Back in the news, right?
Big Ten SEC for using his name, image, and likeness without his permission and stuff. I mean, that's crazy when you think about. I mean, I'm not even gonna get into that discussion, because anyway, that opens up a whole can of worms in terms of things. But it is interesting how everybody wants theirs, in one form or fashion. Real quick, what do you think will come from the Sorsby? What are your sources? What have you written? What are you hearing in terms of, from a national perspective, that could happen from for example, the Sorsby thing, without it being another, pardon the pun, sore spot, for the NCAA and et cetera to deal with. I mean, and without reiterating, you're not supposed to do this, reiterating that to your players, your athletes. Well, what do you think comes of that?
Well, I don't think,
I don't know how he plays again. I don't even know how. I don't know what kind of penance you could pay to get to play again in the NCAA. Maybe I'm wrong. Go ahead.
Well, I think that if they were trying a strategy to get him to play, it's probably something like this. It's going to be, he goes to the facility. They, mention, they bring up the bet against Indiana, which is going to be the toughest part to overcome. They say he's, that he didn't do this at Texas Tech. You go from there, and then you try to get some sort of 4 to 6 game suspension. I don't think that's going to work, though. I don't think it's going to be enough. I think the NCAA can't. If they allow him to play, they open up too many possibilities for this to happen on too many fronts in a sport that you want to protect. I think it, and I did talk to Dr. Borchers about this. It's more me than him. I said, do we worry about point shaving at this level? And James wouldn't speculate on that, but I can. I think, you watch a college football game now, and I do our picks against the spread each week at Sporting News, and you'll watch a game and be like, well, that was a little fishy. And I find myself maybe it's just because you get the pick wrong. You've got to separate that. But there are occasions where you wonder, why did that field goal go in? Why did they do that? Why? And that's a better mentality that can spill over. And if they find it
conspiracy,
if they ever find it in the Power Four, it's not going to be good for the sport. So, the rare, and you've seen the point shaving scandals on the college basketball side. It's not, I think that's a sport easier to manipulate, but, it'd be really bad for college football at the wrong time.
Yeah, it'd be really bad. But, what didn't the NCAA tournament just have its across the board highest viewership of all time, or right up there? I mean, it was an extremely good month of March and early April for the NCAA tournament. Am I correct?
Yeah, and the bettors were pointing to the end of the game when Gale threw the ball down the court, because it was actually a high IQ play to run the clock out, but they're like, see, the spread, and the bettors have a different mentality than sports fans. They always will.
Every time somebody makes a mistake, a college athlete makes a mistake now at the end of a game, it's because of conspiracy theory. Right. It has nothing to do with him just clutching, or the opposite of being clutched, the choking aspect of things. And I mean, that was you end up with a freshman with the ball in his hands. What are you doing, right? He should have just kept the ball. But no, that's the thing you run into. Real quick, let's move that into like the discussion of 76. The 76ers, which is going to be the NCAA tournament now. That's my nickname for it. Did it need to expand by 8 teams? It didn't. I heard somebody talking about it on the radio the other day. It's expanding by 12 teams. I go, no, you've had 68 for a while now. You know, when you count the play-in games, that first round tournament, so to speak, in Dayton, it's going to what, 76. I don't see that as any earth-shattering, earth-moving kind of situation, except you're going to get another Big Ten team in or two and another SEC team in or two. And maybe in a good faith standpoint, a couple of mid-majors that maybe haven't made it in the past. But what's the ramifications of going from 68 to 76?
Well, I probably need.
I know you're a big basketball dude.
I love college basketball, but I probably need more time to think about it because the knee-jerk reaction is, man, this waters down the bracket more. It gets some bubble teams in that shouldn't be in. You know, if we're going by this, like Auburn and Indiana get in last year. San Diego State gets in last year.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it if we let that second MAC team in and we don't sit there and argue for 2 weeks that Miami, that went 31-0 in the regular season, shouldn't be in the tournament. You know, if they get that second MVC team in, I still kind of consider, I kind of go by the rule that tournament doesn't really start till Thursday. It starts at noon on Thursday. We can do those playing games, but it also devalues the conference championship game week a little bit. I love those games where somebody has to win to get in. And, you know, so do we need it? No, but I would go back to when we went from 32 to 48 or 48 to 64. I doubt we had the same conversations. It was probably like, yeah, we need more teams in the tournament. But once we got to 64, which college basketball to me kind of, it's 2 separate histories. It's before 1985, and then it's expanded bracket era on. 1985, Villanova beats Georgetown, and we're off. But I don't know, Tim. I'm just not a fan of it. I do think the SEC and the Big Ten are driving this a lot because then you get that, like you said, 10th, 11th SEC or Big Ten team in the tournament.
Yeah, just like Petiti with his 24-team college football playoff. I mean, what are we talking about? I mean, that's crazy, in my opinion, mainly because of the wear and tear on the actual players involved. I think expanding to 16 makes all kinds of sense. But I don't know about you, Bill. I've said this before. I'm a fan of the conference football championship games for one reason. You've got a conference, and the Big Ten has 18 teams in it now. The SEC has 16. What's wrong with knowing who the champion is of that conference before you move on to the college football playoff? I have no problem with that, especially the fact that you're not playing round robin schedules by any stretch of the imagination in those 2 conferences. Sometimes even over 2 years you haven't played everybody. So, or 3 years you haven't played everybody. So where do you stand on that idea, and how does that stack up against the expansion to 76 teams, if you follow my drift? Because I think football is limited just because of the wear and tear factor. I don't think basketball is. I've always said you could go from 64 to 128 teams in the NCAA tournament. You know what you're doing? You're adding one game. Mm-hmm. You're adding one game, and probably let the higher seeds or whatever you want to call it, 1, 2, 3, 4, through 32 host that first game, or the 1 through 64 host the first game, and then they host their complimenting team on the other side there. But with football, it's a different animal. I mean, guys, the wear and tear physically on a football team is real. So where do you fall in that regard?
Well, I kind of a rare disagreement here. I don't think we need them. I think because if we're going to go to 16 and 24, it's an extra game where and we have the imbalanced schedules. I like your point about it does show who wins the conference, and you get a game like Indiana, Ohio State last year, or Penn State, but it's like the year before Penn State played Oregon, and most of us felt like Ohio State was the best team they had one bad afternoon, and they're not in that game.
And it ended up being that way.
No, and I think Penn State didn't play Michigan that year, and they don't all play each other. So to me, it's more like if we're going to go to 16 and 24, then let's just end the regular season. And I grew up in a Big Ten. You've covered a Big Ten where they didn't have a conference championship game, but in the stakes and the controversy and the tiebreakers were about who goes to the Rose Bowl. Now, if you tie for the Big Ten regular season champion and you're 8-1 and somebody else is 8-1, you're both going to the playoffs anyway. So
exactly,
I
agree with that.
I would say if you gave me the choice between watching Indiana and Ohio State in a Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis or Indiana and Ohio State, and the path is a little bit different and they play each other in the semifinals, I'm taking the latter. I'm still taking the regular season game first, by the way. And next year they play in Bloomington. I'm taking that game over any of them because I love those regular season games. I'm just not so sure that the colleges are going to feel that way anymore.
Yeah, the redundancy factor, a possible factor that you're talking about is that Indiana and Ohio State played, in terms of the college football playoff, a near meaningless game for the Big Ten championship game last year. It was meaningful because it did determine the Big Ten champion, but there was, when they set the seeds in the college football playoff, it was 1-2, the winner 1 and the loser 2, and they very easily could have played in the national championship game again. Is that what we want? But if they're the two best teams, that's what I'm saying. We got to, the NCAA really has got to decide, not the NCAA, college football playoff. Do you want to be NFL minor, which is what that can be? You can play a team in the regular season and still have to play them in the playoff, and maybe even play them, as it turns out, maybe even play them 3 times, during the regular season, during a conference championship game, and then in the playoff somewhere. That's kind of crazy when you think about those possibilities, but the bigger you make the field, the more possible that is.
Well, I don't know how many years it'll take for the college game to think like the NFL does. And I'll use the example of, when Baker Mayfield was the quarterback of the Browns, the Steelers won both regular season games, but Baker Mayfield went into Pittsburgh and Heinz Field at the time and won a playoff game. And that's the one everybody remembers. Whereas I've covered, and you've covered, rematches,
oh yeah.
Recent example, Ohio State goes to Oregon and loses in the regular season at Autzen, and it's so memorable for the Ducks. And, we remember the celebration. Then Ohio State blisters them in the Rose Bowl.
Wait, we also remember it was a hell of a game.
The first one
was in October.
The second one
October
was
the 12th.
The second one was not a hell of a game unless you were from Columbus. That was a beatdown. And
yes,
I just think in college, I tend to remember the regular season game more than the playoff game. And that's a rare instance where that's the thinking where it changes. Like, for example, I remember LSU beating Alabama 9-6 more than Alabama beating them in the rematch in the BCS championship game, where I almost fell asleep in the third quarter. In most cases, the rematch does not live up to the regular season game. And you could argue the Oregon-Ohio State, the rematch, if you're not a fan of either team, that was not a better game. That was just a display of how good Ohio State was. I'm more of a regular season game should matter more, but in 5 years, if you ask me that question, Tim, I bet you I have a different answer.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's the point. When you expand the field, you're going to have more of a chance of having rematches. It's just inevitable. And, I keep thinking back to that Georgia-Alabama national championship game way back when. I mean, just right on down the line. It's I don't know. I guess I don't have a problem in this sense. I want to see the two best teams play for the national championship, right? And there's a good chance they can both be from the same conference. The ironic thing is, since the field has gone to 12 teams, an SEC team has not made the national championship game, and I think that's I think that's somewhat of a referendum to a certain extent of having to just play one game to win it all or 2 games to win it all. Now you got to play at least 3 to win it all. And you've probably played in your conference championship game. But I think that is somewhat of a referendum in favor of the Big Ten. What's your take on that?
Yeah, and that's why this conversation's being driven is the SEC.
Right.
The one thing I will say, I'm not a pro SEC guy by any means, but their conference championship game is most closely tied to the identity of the conference because they were the first one to do it. I've been to SEC championship games. The atmospheres are crazy.
Yep.
I think they're one of the few conferences that might still care more about that, but they're not being rewarded for that. Like Georgia, the last 2 years wins the SEC and they lose their first playoff game. That's why they're having this conversation now. That's why Greg Byrne came out and said, that ship has sailed. And I do think the conference championship games are an endangered species. I think they'll be gone. Well, this opinion, I think they will or should be gone within the next 5 years. And then we'll go play 16 teams and go from there. That's a personal preference, but you mentioned why you like the conference championship games, and you're not wrong. So we'll see. The SEC is going to be the one to drive. And another reason why I think the SEC is going to drive this conversation is this year, they're going to a 9-game conference schedule. And the SEC is different.
Wait a minute. They're almost acting like they invented that. Go ahead.
Well, of course. But they
like NASCAR. Go ahead.
Well, that means half of its teams are going to have one more loss.
I know, but the Big Ten's been 9 games for a little while. It was 9 games a long time ago. Illinois was the only team, I think, in the old time Big Ten to have a 9-0 regular season record in the Big Ten back in 1983, I think it was, and stuff. But go ahead. I was just throwing a shot at the SEC again.
I was going to say the Big Ten, when they went to 9 games, I was concerned. I was like, well, that's another loss. But it's actually it's been so much more entertaining to have an extra conference game than watching Ohio State play another MAC team. But if the SEC misses out a playoff team or two because of this 9-game schedule, they're really going to drive for 16. They're probably going to push to eliminate conference championship games. The way to replace that, but we keep hearing, how do you replace the money? How do you replace the money from conference championship weekend? I'm going to be honest, Tim, the last couple of years, I'll gravitate toward the game where the team that wins gets in the playoff. I'm not saying Ohio State, Indiana, or Georgia, Texas. It was Georgia, Alabama last year. Georgia, Texas the year before. I probably didn't pay as close attention to those games because they were great games. I paid more attention to Ohio State, Indiana because I knew the winner was getting the 1 seed. But I was flipping over or had my eyes down toward – I had 2 TVs in the living room. My eyes down toward that Duke game because it directly impacted the playoff picture, sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah. Duke won the game, but they didn't get in. But Virginia would have been a playoff team had they won.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because Alabama got in because it played Georgia in that championship game. I mean, otherwise, Alabama's a team that should have been left out and Notre Dame put in. That was we talked about that back when it happened, if you remember, Bill. But, everybody was talking about Miami. I go, no, Alabama's a team that's not as good as you think it is. Not worthy, in my opinion. Then they beat another team that was pretty much not worthy, Oklahoma, and all the Alabama fans were beating their chest. And then they went and played a real team, Indiana, and that was that, right?
Correct.
There's no – settle it on the field. The only good thing about the playoffs is they do settle it on the field in some form or fashion. And then you're always going to be griping that this team should have gotten in. But it's always a team that should have gotten in 10th, 11th, or 12th, not 1, 2, or 3, or 4. And that to me is the more teams you add to a situation, the more other teams can have the gripe that they should have gotten in because look at the head-to-head comparisons or whatever. It dilutes the field, in my opinion, in that way that you can make arguments for teams that clearly shouldn't be in, but then they had that 1 year where they had a really good record and they claim they should be in over like an Alabama or a Clemson or somebody whose actual presence actually pushes the needle, if you follow my drift. So I just think the dilution of the field is and they're almost meaningless games. If let's say they go to a 2014 playoff and one plays 24 in some respects. Do you really want to see that football game?
You can watch it in October. That's the point.
That's a paycheck. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. What you just said.
So
that's why the college football season meant more. But go ahead.
I hope that the college football playoff caps it at 16 when they're going to go to 16, Tim. They will. And I hope
they got to go
there.
16.
We don't need more. The regular season is fine. It hasn't been impacted too much. But once we go to 16, and I had this conversation earlier this morning, it opens the door for a couple things that college fans really aren't used to that NFL fans are used to. And I'm talking, hey, it's week 13. We're in. We're going to sit our starters. We're not playing.
Yeah.
You saw that a little bit last year because Ohio State was able to play it safe with Carnell and Jeremiah late in the season. Why? Because they needed them for the playoff. Will that impact?
Plus, they were hurt. They were banged up, legitimately banged up.
But why not rest them? Right? Why force it? And when in past seasons, maybe you have them push through a little bit because you absolutely need to win one of those late season games. Will it impact the Ohio State-Michigan game? It's not out of the question.
I know.
It's not out of the question that game gets moved around in the future. But less on that just because of the moneymaker it is for Fox right now and the amount of eyeballs on that game every year. I think they'll leave it.
Oh, you saw. Yeah. You saw where Fox bought the rights back to the Big Ten championship game.
So I would say if they eliminate the conference championship game, greater chance that Michigan, Ohio State never moves. If they don't, they could play with that a little bit down the line. And people that think it's sacrilegious, you're right. But I grew up with Notre Dame and USC don't play next year. That's my answer.
Yeah.
So, it can happen.
Ohio State doesn't play Penn State next year.
Correct.
This coming season. That's one of the great, my opinion, one of the great rivalries out there ever since Penn State joined the league back in '93. It's been a marquee matchup, and it's been a ratings bonanza for the most part for whomever's showing it. Usually Fox, but the bottom line is it's been, even when it's been a noon game, it's been a ratings bonanza. And how do you get to a situation where that game's not on the schedule from a conference standpoint? I have no idea. I just don't understand that. And Ohio State's finally getting around to playing USC this year. Why they haven't played them the last 2 years. Those are, when you talk about what they call that inventory on the shelves for the networks, why those games haven't been scheduled before. Well, you can say, well, Ohio State shouldn't have to play USC every year and vice versa. Well, what are you in this for? You're hoping they're going to make the Big Ten championship game, and then you get to watch that game. I just that's the problem with too big to fail can also really dilute things. And I think the Big Ten at 18 teams is a fairly diluted conference in terms of the matchups you see from week to week. You get some really good ones, but there are some great ones that are leaving on the shelf. I don't know if you agree with that, but I just don't understand that.
Well, that's why USC got in the league, right? They want to play Michigan.
Right.
They want to play Ohio State. They want to play Penn State.
They want the money.
UCLA, Washington, Oregon, same deal. Oregon wants to play. Oregon's got it. They've played them. They've gone to the big house. They played Ohio State this year, right? Oregon comes to Ohio State. Late in the season too. It'll be a super important game. So
big time game.
I want to see those games. I almost look at the Big Ten and it would never work this way, but I think the Big Ten has a top, half, and then the lower half where there's some teams on there that are rough right now. It's not to say they can't be, but if you had that top half of the Big Ten where you talk about that first tier of teams going into the season, Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State, USC, Iowa, Illinois probably be ranked. Washington might be ranked. I'd watch those 9 teams play each other.
You almost named 10.
If I get a 10th one, but I'm also,
you could call it the Big Ten of the Big Ten.
I got a great idea for a name for that conference if I had that 10th team.
But
at the same time, you need the way the schedule is constructed. Yeah, Ohio State's going to play Rutgers, and they're going to play Maryland, and they're going to play teams that they're going to beat, but they probably beat those teams anyway. The quality of
right now on paper, they're facing the toughest schedule in college football this coming season, which is interesting,
Well, it's going to be an interesting year but I'd rather watch those games. I'd rather watch Ohio State play at Texas. I'd rather watch Ohio State play Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, Iowa. Are they going to Iowa or is Iowa at home? I think they're going to
Iowa. Can't remember.
Either way.
I can't remember. They're going to Iowa.
Yeah, that's a tough game at Kinnick. And we don't see that game.
Of course it is.
Enough.
Yeah.
So I'm cool with that. I wish more teams would do it. And, but that's hinting at wanting a super league, which I think we're a long way from that actually happening.
But if the Super League was formed, like I just pointed out about the Big Ten, you've got all these great games that haven't happened in the Big Ten because it's 18 teams now, not 10. If it was 10, if you just took those top 10 and made it into a league, and it was a 9-game round robin schedule, I think round robin's the right term there, right? And it was just like back in the early 80s when you had the opportunity to play 9 games if you wanted to. From a league standpoint, that would be unbelievable. Box office, television ratings league there. If you got rid of the bottom 8 and just had the top 10 of the Big Ten, that would be something right there. And just like with the SEC, same thing. SEC, just because you're in the SEC doesn't mean you're SEC caliber. Mississippi State, Kentucky for the most part. Arkansas has fallen on hard times. Ole Miss has risen up, right. But like South Carolina has been right there knocking on the door, but never going through the door, for example. I mean, there are all kinds of teams that are considered themselves part of the big dance when in fact they're the ones that are supposed to mix the punch and make sure the floor stays clean for the big boys. So, the thing about college football, though, it's based on, since I've been growing up, ever since I've known what college football is all about, which has been I'm 71 or 72, so it's about 66 years. You've got to have teams on your schedule that everybody knows you're going to win. Now the question is win by how much or how many.
Right.
That's what makes the fans of the Blue Bloods is they know they're going to get 5 or 6 wins every year. Now in those big games, how are they going to fare? But now with the college football playoff expanding and stuff, you want to avoid some of those possible jeopardy games. I mean, are we going to see? I don't think we should, but are we going to see like Texas, Alabama go to the wayside? Texas, Ohio State go to the wayside down the road. I mean, obviously on schedule-wise, we still see some of those big games sitting out there for Ohio State in the future, but will they be there when you get there? That's the big question.
No, because and not until at least the committee shows that they're going to honor strength of schedule. You mentioned Ohio State with the schedule that they have this year. It's not out of the question to me that if they went 9-3, depending on who the 3 is, that they should still get in. I think Texas was that team last year, and we had this argument, and there's 2 sides of it. The one was, I was on this side of it where I was like, if they didn't play Ohio State, they would have got in.
Yeah.
And there's others that said if they wouldn't have lost to Florida, they would have got in, which is fair. But I still think the committee would have looked at that 10-2, which is the same record as Oklahoma, and they beat Oklahoma. And it wouldn't have mattered who they could have played Minnesota. They could have played Minnesota State. They could have played anybody. Minnesota State with Craig T. Nelson coaching.
There you go.
But it wouldn't have mattered. They would have been in. And Sark had a great point there. And I tend to, until the committee says, hey, we're going to honor that strength of schedule, and then we're going to have these problems. I still think they count wins and losses first.
Hey, I'm hitting you out of left field with this question. But I just want to, what is your take on Michigan right now as we speak? What is your take on what you expect to see from Michigan football in 2026? I'm asking that because of the Cal Whittingham factor, the huge shakeup, obviously, that's gone on up there, justifiably so, over the last couple of years. But what is your take on where Michigan is in terms of what it has been, what it could be?
I think they'll go 9-3 next year, but the same as last year, but it'll be a better product, if that makes sense. Like they were 9-3 last year, but you went and watched them play at USC and you were kind of like, Yeah, they had a very soft Big Ten schedule last year.
Yeah.
They were able to beat Purdue and Minnesota, and I would argue their best regular season game was what? Washington, maybe? At home?
Yeah, might have been. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
They played very poorly at USC, Oklahoma. Ohio State was able to break the losing streak. But I say 9-3. Bryce Underwood comes into focus. They need development at that position. Their receiver play needs to be better. They haven't. I tell this stat all the time. It's an amazing stat. They haven't had a first-round receiver since Braylon Edwards in the NFL.
Isn't that crazy?
Draft. 21 years.
Yeah.
Their defense, I think their offensive and defensive lines will be improved. I just don't know that they have the talent level that they had with those late era Jim Harbaugh teams. So, but I'm going to say this. I like Kyle Whittingham. Urban likes them. I've heard the quotes from Urban this week. Urban obviously likes them. And, they which is going to be weird for Urban because he lives, eats, and breathes the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry as well, but his friend's coaching the other team now. So I think that they'll probably be looking at their schedule. It's tough. They play Oklahoma again. They play Ohio State. They've got Penn State. So I think they'll go 8-4, 9-3, but you'll watch them and you'll feel different. You'll be like, hey, that's a solid program, because that's what Kyle Whittingham does. He is a solid coach, a solid program. Like I said, their record was deceiving last year, and it showed up late in the season. I mean, they just weren't a team that you thought, man, they would be in the playoff. But again, had they not played Oklahoma and gone 10-2, it would not have surprised me that if they would have gotten the playoff.
Yep, exactly. The other team you just mentioned a second ago, which could be an interesting harbinger game, is Penn State. The Matt Campbell era. I don't know if you saw the pictures from their what do they call it, their blue-white game or blue-white scrimmage to cap spring football. I don't know if that was just the security personnel that they gathered into the stands to kind of show that somebody was there, but it was not 40,000 whatever like Ohio State had on a rainy day or potential stormy day in Ohio Stadium and stuff. But if there was curiosity about what the Matt Campbell era is bringing to Penn State, it sure didn't show up in their spring game. What is your take on where that program is at the moment?
Kind of the same answer. I mean, I think he'll do a great job there. I love Matt Campbell. I think in 25 years, we're going to look back at what he did at Iowa State. You're going to be like, wow, how'd that happen?
Yeah.
Culture builder.
I agree.
Mount Union guy, culture builder, just cares about the player first. And I think Penn State needed a reset. The way they did it was peculiar last year, but, it unraveled very quickly. But I think they were ready. I was at the Oregon game when Penn State played them, and I've used the term, you've never had a stadium where when I go to the stadium, you kind of sense the mood, right? Like, is it are they excited? Are they, ravenous? Is it like Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings, or is it tense? And because players feed off that, is the mood tension. The mood in that stadium that night was, they were frustrated before the game started, frustrated with all these top 5 losses. And then they come back and it's juiced up and then they lose. And the frustration afterward was very palpable, the things that were being said in the tunnels afterward. But you knew that was over. I think
always is over there, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah, Matt Campbell will do a very good job there. Their schedule is very friendly. It's set up that, hey, they could go out and make a run and be that sleeper Big Ten playoff team around Rocco Becht, around the defense. And I like his way. I think given what was out there and what they tried to do, they were trying to get Cignetti and some others. They landed a good one. And I think Michigan did too. But that adds to the quality of coaches in the conference where you already have Day, Cignetti, Dan Lanning, Lincoln Riley. Now you have Whittingham, Campbell, Pat Fitzgerald at Michigan State. I mean,
back.
Ferentz is still around. Ferentz in a little trouble now, but whatever.
Yeah.
The top, and Brett Bielema is on a great 2-year run at Illinois. The quality of coaches in this conference is amazing.
Agreed, 100%. Real quick before you go, is it a crime though that Ohio State's not playing Penn State? I kind of alluded to that earlier, but I wanted to get your take on that. I mean, is it? Are we being robbed of one of the games you always look forward to every season since 1993.
I hate that they're not playing. And I know it's been one-sided of late, but, somebody that played Ohio high school.
Still been some damn good games.
I'm trying to think if I don't want to lie. I don't think I've ever been to a Big 33 high school all-star game. I don't even know if they still have it. But that was a big deal.
I don't either.
It was a big deal to be picked when I was in high school. If you were picked to go play in that Ohio, Pennsylvania high school Big 33 game, it was a huge game.
Yeah, in Hershey, PA.
Huge high school presences in both. Huge traditions. Love the Penn State, Ohio State games. There's been some really good ones. Now, again, Ohio State, it's one-sided, and Penn State, they play it off as, we're unrivaled and all that. But then, come on, man. Penn State, just like Nebraska, just like USC and Oregon, they signed up to play in this league to play Ohio State, play Michigan. Yeah. Those are the two that you want to play because of the highest visibility game. So, I'm going to miss that game. And, but Ohio State, it's replaced well. I am excited to see them play USC. I think there's something to the Ohio State-Oregon dynamic because they've both been very good. And the Indiana game next year will be hot. It'll be because, Indiana beat them. And Kurt Cignetti's got something going on there. And I think the stakes for that regular season game, it's arguably the biggest regular season game in Memorial Stadium in Bloomington's history.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing about Penn State is, remember when the teams were asked to name their rivalries or the ones they wanted to keep on the schedule, and Penn State had none. Remember that? It's almost like Penn State was trying to declare itself the Notre Dame of the Big Ten. I mean, we want to be independent within the Big Ten, the Confederation.
It's not a good strategy. Not a good strategy. You want to keep those rivalries with Ohio State. You want to keep those. Yeah. They have a good. Penn State-Michigan series has been good too, but they don't play it as much. But they've had some really memorable games.
Right, but it's a crime, in my opinion, for college football fans not to be able to see that. And if I was networks, like I said, I'd be upset that that's not on the schedule somewhere for somebody to get to reap the rewards from the networks, which is why everybody's got all this revenue sharing going on and everything else right now. Hey, Bill, last question before you go. The 5 to play 5. You're a young man. You've got kids, et cetera. 5 to play 5. Max, what is it? 19, basically 19 through 24, if I'm doing my math correctly, would be the oldest a person could be playing as it has been proposed, playing in college athletics, because you'd have to start by the time you're 19, I think, and be done by 24, no matter if you go on a mission for BYU or if you go serve your country in the armed forces, et cetera. You'd have to be done. What is just your take on that? And there is something to be said for finally going, hey, trying to put a corral around whatever you can left by the NCAA, isn't it, of showing some kind of control?
Makes sense. I think it makes sense in terms of you have 5 years, you're getting paid now, get in, get out, do what you need to do. And the red shirt's pretty much gone away, right? Like we're in this phase where red shirts have been, they propose like
they've been allowed to play a little. Yeah, they've been allowed to play a little, but then in that case, red shirt would go away. So you wouldn't have that get down on one knee and beg for another year.
Not just play, because the guys that go to the NFL typically go after 3 years anyway, the blue chip guys.
The blue chips, yeah. But now you got guys staying in for the paycheck. You got guys staying in college.
That's where
now.
It gets sticky. Maybe
football and basketball for the paychecks.
Like if
that makes sense.
What if Jeremiah Smith stayed 5 years at Ohio State? Like you part of you'd be like, this is amazing. The other part would be like, he probably should be in the NFL. And you get that in basketball a little bit with the 23-year-old guy playing point guard. I mean, Yaxel was one of those guys this year that was getting a little bit of that as a senior at Michigan. But no, I'm cool with it in general because I think you can get it. And I would say if they gave waivers, they would have to be very, very limited and far in between. For example, like if somebody had cancer and then they recovered and came back and played. If somebody had just a ridiculous leg injury. Not the regular leg injury, the regular ACL. Hey, you got a fifth year. Yeah. This is what it's there for. So
that's the jeopardy you face.
That's how I would do it. But if you had like a very extreme situation, I would give out a few waivers. But that way you're avoiding the Trinidad Chambliss and the Diego Pavia things that we're avoiding this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Bill Bender, thank you very much for joining me, man. And Clay somewhere has got to be nervous about you sitting in his seat and flying the airplane so well, especially through a little bit of the turbulence I threw at you. But thank you very much for joining me, my man. By the way, who you got? I'm not going to ask you this because I can't name any of the Derby horses right now. I just looked at the list of them about an hour ago, and I can't remember any of them.
Is there one named Renegade that I saw?
I think so.
But I'm not a Steelers guy. So, maybe stay away from that one. But I'll pick one. And you know what? It's a fun race. I always enjoy watching it. We'll be in, like I said, we'll be in Cincinnati for the weekend a little bit. And maybe on the way back, I'll lay down a small bet and lose my money and then go from there. I don't think I will say this, the years that I have bet on it and been down there, I've never picked the winner. So I'm not expecting to tomorrow.
It's a cavalry charge at the beginning, brother, when you got 19 horses. Do you see that 19 of the 20 horses entered? Came out end of last week, have Secretariat in their bloodlines. So he was not known as the world's greatest sire when he departed this earth, but I think his genes are coming around, right? I mean, 19 out of 20 is a hellacious number, right?
That's not bad, man. It's not a bad bloodline to have.
Yeah, there you go. 23andMe. I guess they found that. No, I'm just joking. Hey, Bill Bender, thank you for joining me, my man. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Hey, thanks so much.